This is Greek with David Hutchison. Me verbs. So far, the verbs that we've studied have come from the omega conjugation. If a verb is in the omega conjugation, it ends in omega in the lexical form. There's another conjugation of verbs. These are verbs that end in me, and we call these me verbs. Now, we have studied the being verb a me, but it behaves differently than these verbs today in many places. So it's probably best to think of a me on its own terms, and then to think of these verbs on their own terms. One thing you'll see is that there are different endings for me verbs in the present, active, indicative. Elsewhere, we get to use all of the endings that we're already familiar with, but they are going to be different here in the present, active, indicative. And here are these endings. Me, sigma, si, min, te, asi. Me, sigma, si, with movable nu. Min, te, asi, with movable nu. These are the endings that we'll see in the present, active, indicative.
Me verbs. Me, sigma, si, min, te, asi. Me verbs. Me, sigma, si, min, te, asi.
When we're talking about me verbs, we're going to talk about the present stem, and we're going to talk about the verb stem. The present stem is different than the verb stem. The verb stem will reduplicate using an iota to form the present stem. So, for example, we have the verb didomi, which means I give. The verb stem is da. It reduplicates using an iota and becomes di-da. So da is the verb stem, di-da is the present stem. The verb tithemi, its verb stem is the, its present stem is tithe. It reduplicates using an iota, and as you've seen before with reduplication, rather than using the th in that theta, it will just use the t in that theta, the tau. So the verb stem of tithemi is the. The present stem is tithe. Now the verb histemi. The verb stem is sta. The present stem is hista. A couple of things happen to make that change occur, but you don't need to worry about that. The verb stem is sta. The present stem is hista. So when we want to form the present active indicative, we will use that present stem plus the new endings. And you'll see that the present stem lengthens in the singular. So dida lengthens to dido. Tithe lengthens to tithe. And hista lengthens to histe. Here's what it looks like for didomi, which means I give, or I grant, or I appoint. Didomi, didos, didosi, with movable nu, didomen, didote, didoasi, with movable nu. So we've got the present stem, and then we've got me, sigma, si, min, te, asi. And on the singular side, it lengthens. Didomi, didos, didosi, didomen, didote, didoasi. This would mean I give, you give, he gives, and so forth. Here's the present active indicative of tithemi. This verb means I put or I place or I lay down among some of the options. Tithemi, tithes, tithesi with movable nu. Tithamen, notice there's no lengthened vowel here. Tithamen, tithete, titheasi. I put, you put, he puts, we put, you put, they put. And histemi. This means I stand or I cause to stand. You yourself could stand up, or you could stand someone else up. So both of the senses here are possible. Histemi, histes, histesi, histamen, histate, histasi. So we see the lengthening in the singular, no lengthening in the plural. I stand, you stand, he stands, we stand, you stand, they stand. So the present active indicative is the only place we're going to use these new endings. Me, sigma, si, with movable nu, min, te, asi, with movable nu. What will the present, middle, and passive do? We're still going to use that present stem. Then we're going to use the endings that we expect to use, the number 3 endings. My, si, tai, methus, they, entai. Didomai, didosai, didotai, didomatha, didosthe, didontai. So this is just that present stem plus my, si, tai, methus, they, entai. So that one won't pose any issues for us. Let's look at the imperfect tense. The imperfect tense uses that same present stem, and then it's going to do things that imperfect tense verbs do. It's going to have an augment, then that present stem, and then it's going to do the number 2 endings. You may see some lengthening in the singular. I wouldn't worry about trying to predict it. So here's the imperfect active indicative of didomi. We have an augment on the front, then we have that present stem, and then we have nu, sigma, blank, min, te, nu, or son. Here it's son. Edidun, edidus, edidu, edidamen, edidate, edidason. Just focus on the normal keys and you'll be totally fine. You've got augment, number 2 endings. The same pattern you expect for imperfect middle or passive will show up. You've got augment on the front, number 4 endings on the back. Edidamain, edidasa, edidata. This is main, sa, ta, methus, they, enta. So then the plural, edidamatha, edidosthe, edidonta. So we have the present stem, dida. We have an augment in front. Then we have those number 4 endings, main, sa, ta, methus, they, enta. So those forms used the present stem. Remember that present stem was a reduplicated stem using an iota. So from da, it went to dida. From the, it went to tithe. And from sta, it went to hista. Other forms are just going to use the verb stem. So when you look at a vocabulary list, look to the right of a vocab word and see if you see the little bitty root sign with the root, the verb stem, or the root, the verb root of that verb. You want to make sure to pay attention to that. These 3 verbs that you've already seen, didomi, tithemi, and histemi, they can be compounded. That means they can add a prepositional prefix to it. So in that case, pay attention to the prepositional prefix, but then whatever the verb stem is from the normal form, da, the, or sta, be on the lookout for that. Look out for that along with that prepositional prefix. In other forms, you'll see that verb stem. You may see some lengthening, you may not. Don't worry about trying to predict it. We're in the recognition business. Then just look for your normal keys. One place where I want to point out something that does do a little bit different here is the aorist active indicative. This looks just like we expect it to, except for one thing. We're used to seeing that aorist key sigma alpha. Some of these verbs, not all of them, but some of them, use kappa alpha instead of sigma alpha. So you could call these kappa aorists or kappa alpha aorists. So didomi has an aorist active form edoka. We've got augment on the front. We've got the verb stem do. It's lengthened there. Then you've got ka, the kappa alpha. Tithemi, it does this also. Its aorist form is etheka. Augment, lengthened verb stem, kappa alpha. Afiemi, a verb that can mean I forgive. This does this also. Afeka. Now, how are you going to know that this is aorist rather than perfect? Well, you're going to see the augment on front. You're not going to see reduplication. So when you see augment kappa alpha, you know it's a kappa alpha aorist. When there's no reduplication in kappa alpha, you know it's a kappa alpha aorist. Let's look at the full paradigm of didomi right here in the aorist active indicative. Edoka, edokas, edoke, movable nu. Edokamen, edokate, edokan. You've got an augment on front. That's a sign of a past tense verb. Then we have that verb stem. It's lengthened. Then you have that kappa alpha. So these are kappa aorists or kappa alpha aorists. This is the aorist form of didomi. So it would mean I gave, you gave, he gave. Now you might put a star by that form, edokin. It's pretty common in the New Testament. He gave. We gave, you gave, they gave. The aorist middle form, there's not a ton of these, but I want to show you. It's going to use an augment like we would expect. There will be a stem change on the aorist middle, and then we're going to have the number 4 endings. So here's the most common aorist middle form in the New Testament of a me verb. This is from tithemi. You see that verb stem the, an augment on the front, and then one of those number 4 endings, etheta. Aorist passive, just what you expect, does an augment on front, theta eta, plus number 2 endings. You'll see this form edathane. This is from didomi. You've got the augment on front, verb stem da, then theta eta, and those number 2 endings. He was given or it was given. I'll show you future also. Future does just what you would expect. We've got the verb stem, maybe lengthened. We've got sigma, that's what we expect for future. Then our normal number 1 endings. So, doso, I will give. This is from didomi. The verb stem is da, lengthens to do. We've got that sigma, then our endings. I will give. For future middle, we'll do the verb stem. It may or may not be lengthened. We'll do sigma, that's that future key. And then we'll do some middle or passive endings, the number 3 endings. So this form would be future middle. Exact same pattern as we've seen before. So this is dosomai. I will give myself, for myself, or I myself will give. Then future passive does just what a future passive does. We've got the verb stem, theta eta plus sigma. Theta eta sigma was a future passive key before. It's still a future passive key now. Then we're going to do the number 3 endings. So dothesomai, I will be given. perfect forms, they do what we expect. They reduplicate, and then kappa alpha. So dedoka, I have given. Now remember, we looked at that aorist form already that was edoka. It had an augment rather than reduplication. So just make yourself a note. If it has augment plus kappa alpha, it's aorist. If it has reduplication plus kappa alpha, it's perfect. It wouldn't hurt you to write down a couple of these forms because they are somewhat common. Perfect middle or passive, we're going to reduplicate. We're going to use verb stem, and we're going to use number 3 endings. Dedomai, reduplication de, verb stem da, number 3 endings my, sai, tai, etc. So we've looked at the entire indicative mood. What about other forms that are outside of the indicative mood? Different Greek books take different approaches. Some books list everything out for you just so you can see it. Other books take a much more minimalistic approach. That's, I think, probably better, not to overwhelm you. What should you expect to see in these other forms? Well, they're going to behave just like you would expect them to behave. Look for that verb stem, may or may not be lengthened. Then focus on your regular keys, and you should be fine. Now I want to show you some of the most frequent me verbs and some of the things that you should be looking for on them. So here's ditto me. We've already used this one before. It means I give. Can also mean I grant or I appoint. In various forms of this verb, you'll see dida, that's that present stem, or you'll see da, that's the verb stem, or you'll see do, that's the verb stem lengthened. So if you see dida, da, or do, be thinking ditto me. This one is pretty common, so go ahead and write that down. Histe me, which means I stand or cause to stand. You'll frequently see stay or sta. Afie me. Interesting verb. It can mean I forgive. It can also mean I forsake. Just pay attention to context and you'll be fine. You'll see afe with eta, afe with epsilon, or afie. Paradidomi. This is adding the prepositional prefix para onto didomi. So we'll see para dida, para da, or para do. Anistemi, which means I raise or I rise. You'll frequently see anasta or anaste. Tithemi, verb you've already seen, I put or I place, or even I lay down. Jesus lays down his life for us. You'll see the or the. Apalumi. Another common me verb, it means I destroy or I kill, or in the middle, it can mean I perish. With this verb, you'll frequently see apale. Femi, which means I say or I mean. You'll frequently see fe. Apa didomi, this is adding the prepositional prefix apa to didomi. So you'll see apa do or apa da. This verb means I give or I repay. Now I also just want to show you the top 10 me verbs in the New Testament. These are specific forms. Edokin. I told you already this one is very frequent. It's the most frequent form of any me verb. It means in translation, he gave. This form is aorist active indicative, third singular from didomi, I give. Edathe. This one's also from didomi. You see that verb stem da. You see an augment on front plus theta eta. So augment theta eta, aorist passive. This one's aorist passive indicative, third singular. Anastas. This is a participle form from anistemi. In translation, this would be rising. This one is an aorist active participle, nominative masculine singular, from anistemi, I raise or I rise. Ephe, this translates he said or he was saying. Interestingly, this form can either be second aorist or the imperfect active indicative, third singular, from themi. This verb means I say or I mean. Dunai, this is from didomi. This is an infinitive. It's an aorist active infinitive from didomi. You would translate it to give. Exesten, this is the verb that means it is lawful. It never occurs in first person in the New Testament. Wouldn't really make much sense for it to. It's present active indicative, third singular, from exemi. Par edoken, this is from para plus didomi, para didomi. He delivered, or he betrayed, aorist active indicative, third singular. Doso, still from didomi. Here we've got that lengthened verb stem. We've got sigma plus number one endings. This is future. Future active indicative, first singular. I will give. Aphaken, this is from aphiemi, which means I forgive or I leave. So aphaken could mean he forgave or he left. This is an aorist active indicative. This is one of these kappa aorists. Third singular from aphiemi. And then one more. This is also from didomi. This is da thesetai. So we have that verb stem da. Then you have theta, eta plus sigma. That's a key for future passive. This one translates, it will be given. It's a future passive indicative, third person singular. So most of the time, me verbs behave like omega verbs. As a general rule, pay attention to these verb stems and look for your typical clues, and you should be just fine.